if it's about anything else, it will get ripped out of my hands. It's much better to hold those things loosely and let them go rather than hold on to them. Because if you're doing tug of war with God, guess who loses?
Yeah. Hey everybody, thanks for jumping on to another episode of Church Chat. This is the podcast where we have conversations you wish you were having about ministry. Real conversations with real people about real ministry stuff. And I am super stoked, about this conversation that we're going to have today. My name is Josh Ott, and I'm one of your hosts.
And I'm Emily, and today's guest is somebody who I had the pleasure of being in his sphere of influence several years ago. Greg Wollenhaupt is the care director at Faith Church, and we're just so excited to have you on today.
Thanks, Josh, Emily. Really appreciate it. Glad to be here.
This is exciting. My first conversation with Greg, though I love his church and many of the people down there. And also, I gotta say, I feel like you're stacking the deck, Emily, for these two truths and a lie competition things.
We'll see.
Season 3, we are going to have to do something different because, well, I'm just getting blown out and losing is not fun.
No, I'm actually really excited about Greg's because he is I feel like he is unassuming, but then like I'm sure he has some wild ones that he, really? I don't know if he'll share them, but he and Sue are wild cards.
What a setup that is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm excited for these.
All right. So you want the two truths and a lie?
Yep.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Number 1, I met my wife Sue at church. Number 2, I once shoveled snow in Africa. Number 3, we gave a mud bath to an elephant in Indonesia.
Oh, man. Emily is racking her brain, and you have listeners can't see this, but she has the look on her face. It's priceless right now because she's like struggling to find a memory, and she can't.
That is exactly. I was like, I have heard how he and Sue met, and I'm like, I know bits and pieces. I know that they were really young, and I'm really trying to remember if they met at church.
So what I love about Greg, man, these are good, and what people don't understand. We have a lot of guests come on here and do it. The shorter the statement, the tougher it is.
Yeah, because it's just like
the more people try to sell something, the easier it is. So
I was a youth pastor. I've been playing two truths and a lie for a long time. Realizing the truth. I mean,
I forgot that you're a former youth pastor. Yeah. Shoot. Okay. I'm locked into my answer. So.
What are you thinking? You didn't think this out loud.
I didn't
all.
usually talk it out. I think it's that you met Sue at church. Okay. I might really regret that. Dang it!
I'm not going.
I'm already regretting. I know you're not.
I'm not going with that. I'm gonna go with the mud bath.
Okay. All right. Actually, go ahead.
Lock it in.
Okay,
we're good.
Okay. I think the lie is I met Sue at church. I met her at the first day of college. So, yes. And she was it was at a pizza party, and we walked in, and I knew somebody else at her table. And we sat down together, and so that's really how we met. I wanted to date her roommate, which she kind of reminds me of periodically. And
ouch!
But I came to my senses very quickly.
Yes, because Sue is amazing.
Yeah, she is amazing.
Yeah.
That is a really good story.
Yeah.
Even though I lost, I can appreciate that one. I thought you were going to say, I didn't meet her at church. I met her in a bar. And then I was going to wonder which direction this conversation was going to go. But college and pizza, trying to make a connection with the roommate, that one holds up.
That's a good one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yep.
So were those other two missions experiences?
Yeah, the one was in Morocco, in the Atlas Mountains in Morocco, when it snowed, and we literally were shoveling like 6 inches of snow off the driveway in Morocco in Africa. And then the other one was just this past January. Sue and I were in Bali for a conference, and we were meeting up with a ministry partner there and looking for something fun to do, and literally found at this Bali zoo you have mud baths to elephants. And we spent like 3 hours giving a mud bath to an elephant.
That's amazing.
Yeah, her name was Adele. We had a lot of fun.
Adele.
That's
There's
great.
a fire burning my...
You better
Dude,
believe
okay.
that's gonna be the cold open. I'm singing that song.
Me singing Adele. There's
Yep.
no amount of good microphones that's gonna make that sound good. Nothing.
Oh,
I
man.
was going like, come on, man, how spiritual can this guy be? We're doing stuff in Africa and Bali. I guess you win. You win, Greg.
Yep. Well, we're super excited to jump in talking about care ministry, leader health, longevity, because you've clearly done it all in ministry. So why don't you give our listeners just a brief overview of your ministry history?
Okay. In the early 80s, like from 81 to 1985, Sue and I were volunteers here at Faith Church in the youth ministry, and the Lord called us to go into ministry full time from there. I was in banking in the Valley, and the Lord called me to go into ministry full time. So we went to Columbia Bible College in Columbia, South Carolina, finished my undergrad there. And then from there, we went to Rochester, New York, and I was a youth pastor with a Christian Missionary Alliance church for about 7 years in Rochester, and then came back to Faith Church in '95. I was called back as the high school youth pastor, and we went on staff then, and we've been on staff ever since. And my position has morphed several times over in the last 29 years that I've been back on staff here at Faith Church. And so we've seen a lot of growth and a lot of change here at Faith Church over those years. But that's kind of in a nutshell what I've been doing for the last 40 years.
I love
love
that.
it.
I love that you started as a volunteer in the church that you have been serving in since 1995.
Yeah.
That tells me a couple of things. One, you are tough. And two, they must love you. They must really love you over there.
Yeah.
Man, that's pretty cool. Since 1995.
Yeah.
What are some of the different roles you've had?
Well, like I said, I started out as the high school youth pastor. That then morphed. I was at for almost 10 years. I was the high school youth pastor, and then that morphed into what we called congregational life, and that was counseling and care ministries and kind of other duties as assigned, baptisms and weddings and funerals and membership and follow up on visitors, and which we called back in those days we called assimilation, which sounds kind of ominous, but it's
It does.
and then that morphed into care and counseling, where it was care ministries and counseling ministry. And then as we started just in this last year launching the new counseling center, it's just become care ministry. And I'm overseeing the care ministries that we have, and then also caring for our staff and for our ministry partners overseas.
Oh, that's cool. That's a cool little addition there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously we rubbed shoulders from my husband's time at Faith
Right.
Church. And so you've been there a really long time. You've seen the evolution of all the things and ups and downs and such. So what have you learned from observing all of that and just your steady presence in that as well?
Yeah, I think you really, the church is constantly changing, and that's one of the things we kind of joke about here at Faith, is that if we're consistent about anything, it's that we change all the time, right? And so, and so I think that's that the church is always growing, it's always changing, and we're always building the airplane while we're flying it. And so, it's really hard to like make super long plans, or you're still doing everything, you're still doing current ministry while you're trying to plan the next thing and to plan that next step and that next evolution of what things look like. So it can get really complex and busy and hard to keep track of sometimes. But I think that's one of the things I've learned, is that as things evolve, there's a beauty to that. But we have to just kind of, like, I feel like I've reinvented myself like 3 or 4 times in the last 30 years. And God like renews my call every time. And so he renews that call. He renews like the direction and the purpose and what I'm doing. And so then I'm able to lean into that. But I think there's been a number of times over the last 30 years where I said, okay, Lord, am I done here? Is this over? And every time he renews my call and says, nope, this is the next phase. This is what the next 10 years looks like. And so it's just been exciting to be a part of that and to see that. But I think I've also learned that in that growth and in those changes, while there's a lot to celebrate, there's wonderful things to celebrate, there's also real losses. We lose information, we lose intimacy, we lose influence as the church grows. And I think that, there's our staff, our pastoral team, we used to go out to lunch together. We'd have staff meeting, and then we'd all go out to lunch together, and we'd hang out, and more we'd get done at lunch than we actually got done in our staff meeting. It was fun, and we enjoyed that. Now we'd have to have a bus to take the team to lunch, right? We can't do that. So we lose that intimacy that we had with each other. Information, there's lots of things going on here I don't know about, and I have to trust that somebody else knows about them. And so I lose that information and influence. I don't go to lunch with Joe with our senior pastor or with the senior team every week like I used to. And so there's influence that gets lost. I'm only influencing my area. I'm not at the meetings where we're talking about the whole church. And so that's a loss.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that?
Well,
how do you reckon with that?
Yeah, I think it's really helpful to be able to call it out, right? It's really helpful to be able to identify it, because losing those things, if we can't call them out, it just feels bad. It's like, it feels like something's wrong, but I just can't put my finger on it. And I'm not happy here anymore, and I just can't put my finger on it. But if I can look at it and go, oh, I've lost intimacy, I've lost influence, I've lost information, that's really helpful, because now I can grieve that, and I can call it out, and I can process it and work through it and go, okay, but I still have intimacy with my team. I still have the information about what's going on in my team. I still have, it's all those things still exist. They're just in a different realm, and I just have to see them and experience them differently.
Do you feel like there are similar losses for a congregation in a church that changes so frequently?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I think that's why it's helpful for us as leaders to be able to call those things out, because you're talking to people that's happening to all the time. We have like 5 different services. 2 of them are going on at the same time. Those people never see each other. Those are separate churches, right? And so that's a loss. Some of our old timers are used to us all being together in one room, and that never happens anymore, right? And so that's a loss to them. That's a loss of that intimacy.
Yeah, which also is like is why care is so important. Yeah, I feel some of that too here. Like we've rapidly grown in the last couple of years, outgrown our space, added services, all this stuff. And there's almost like an intentionality that has to come with those kind of losses and those changes. And for me, when I'm looking at ministry, I'm like, man, you have to like double down on care. And I kind of see that intentionality, and maybe your role now, you mentioned that you're kind of oversee the care ministry. You've successfully launched the counseling dream that you've had for a long time, to have, an off-site counseling center. And you mentioned that you're partly responsible for caring for the team, the leaders, and all that stuff. I'm like, man, so was that an intentional step? Care is always important, right? We're supposed to shepherd. But I feel like as you're going through kind of those transitions, it becomes absolutely essential to be a point of focus.
Oh, absolutely. I think it does. And I think, the counseling center is a really good case in point for what I've been talking about, just what I was talking about, those losses where that was a dream I had for 10 years. As we got closer to it and it became part of the church's vision, I had to kind of let go of it, right? The church took it and ran with it. And now it became something that I had to kind of step back from and let go of and allow that, and so there was some loss connected to that. But I think in that process, back to your point, back to your question, I think there was, care becomes about belonging first, right? Are we creating an environment where people feel like they belong? And so I think that's something we're always working on. We always want to have an environment, where we're not putting up barriers to people that, that maybe would make them feel uncomfortable. So it doesn't matter how they dress or their racial background or socioeconomic background or their political views. Everybody's welcome in our church, in our care groups. We don't want to put up false barriers for people. And so I think that's just a really important aspect of care. Do people feel like they belong here?
So what would you say to fear of loss is a major issue for, in my opinion, it's an issue for people in leadership in churches, pastors especially. I'm thinking of like how often I've seen or I've heard stories about ministry leaders or pastors who were afraid of transitioning to a different role because of losing influence, because of losing power, because of sometimes in unhealthy ways, right? Like losing their identity, which never should be wrapped up in the pulpit or the job, but it is for a lot of people. Yeah. So, and then you like people hanging on too long in ministry, not willing to pass the baton on to the next guy, afraid of retiring, not sure what that means. You've been through so many transitions. You obviously have processed these losses in a very healthy way. What would you say to somebody in ministry who's like fear of losing something, whether it's unhealthy or healthy, is inhibiting them just finding the place God has for them in the story he's building?
You're right. There are times when we grasp the wrong things, right? We're hanging on to things that create our identity. It probably sounds cliche to say this, but my identity has to be in Jesus. My identity has to be in what he's called me to, what he's doing, and so it's got to be about that. If it's about anything else, it will get ripped out of my hands. Right. And so I think it's much better to hold those things loosely and let them go rather than hold on to them. Because if you're doing tug of war with God, guess who loses?
Yeah, that getting it ripped out of your hands thing can be extremely painful.
Yeah, it really can. And I think if God's leading us in a different direction, that's how it ends up. It ends up with it being ripped out of our hands. And then we have to process that with the pain of it being pulled away.
Do you feel like there are certain postures that a leader should adopt to make that easier?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's when I first came here, I had this picture of a castle with a big international no symbol, the big red thing through it, and that represented to me no personal kingdoms. Like I wasn't there to build my kingdom. I was there to build God's kingdom. And that meant I was here to cooperate with everyone. I didn't want to, I was there to share information, to share resources, to help everybody on staff, to help our church move forward. I wasn't building a personal kingdom. Youth ministry wasn't my personal kingdom. And I think that's really helpful. If anything we can do to not be building our own personal kingdoms, I think that helps us to have that looser grasp on things.
That's so good. It's not surprising to me that you have that starting with a picture like that and a thought like that has having that start. It makes sense, like how you have been able to stick so long serving a community. It's so easy, even with the best intentions. It is so easy to build your own kingdom in church ministry world. It really is.
Yeah, because it's real easy to think about like the results that we're getting somehow represent me, right? And if it starts to become about the results, then I start to use people. Then I start to, those become, they're just pawns in my game at that point. And man, now we're in dangerous territory.
That's church hurt territory right there.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah, and for a leader, always striving to get those results or whatever, in addition to adapting, building, I think, especially at Faith, like you said, like building the airplane in the air as you go, could lead to some serious burnout. Have you experienced that at all in your decades of ministry?
Yeah, I mean, there have been some times when I felt pretty burnt out or pretty tired. I think just a couple years ago, the church had me take a sabbatical for about 8 weeks, which I had never done before. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. And so it was really amazing to have that time. And that was really helpful in rekindling my joy, my desire for ministry, I think that having that time away was really good. It gave Sue and I a chance just to be alone together. We went off to a retreat place and had a sabbatical coach who walked along with us through that and helped us process some things and debrief with us for a few days at a retreat, which was really helpful. And we just really, so I think I would say to anybody, I think every church should have a sabbatical policy where every 5 to 7 years, people on staff are getting a sabbatical and getting an extended time off, because man, that's super valuable for helping people not be burnt out.
I don't know if you have, because I'm just spraying this on you, because our church now does not have one, and one of the reasons why is a couple of the elders are just kind of in the realm of like, well, it's just like any other business person. Like, business people don't get sabbaticals. Why would we give free time off to people when they're just like any other kind of employee? What would you say to that?
Well, I would say to that, man, you should take that back to your business and talk to them. I think your people would be more productive if you started to do that in your business.
Yeah.
And why don't you guys take that to your companies and do that? Because I think there is value to it. I mean, there is, and I think if you look not just in the church world, but in the academic world, sabbaticals are something that people do, companies do, and schools do for their faculty. So I mean, I think it isn't just in the church realm. And I know people who have been in the business world and have been elders at our church or whatever, and then have come on staff for a while for various reasons, and they come out of that and go, oh, that was different than being in the business world.
Yeah.
That wasn't the same as what I was used to. And I think I think the thing that people forget is that our church is also like, my whole family is here, right? You don't bring your family, you don't bring your wife and your kids to work with you once a week. That just doesn't happen in the business world. This is a whole life commitment that's on a different level than what you have in the business world. And so I would say that requires some recharging that you don't need to have from the business world.
Yeah, I think there's a different care required for those who have, different kind of soul care, maybe, for those who are, devoting their lives and their jobs to caring for the souls of people.
Yeah.
And, I spent a lot of time with people and very, very successful entrepreneurs and business world people. And there's definitely a different vibe, no matter how good you are at boundaries. There's, in some aspects, the clock never turns off for us, even if it's just our internal dialogue, and how we're thinking and how we're praying for people. And, there's the whole spiritual warfare part of this that can be so exhausting and depleting, and yet you're asked to continue to plow forward, and it can really wear people down. So I'm glad you had the 8 weeks.
Yeah.
I got 8 weeks off in 2021, and it was life-giving.
Yeah. And I think for us, we found too that we didn't have any responsibilities. So there was no expectation that I was going to write a book while I was away, or anything like that, could develop some great program. And so it really became about relationships, our relationship with God, and just really spending time with him. But my relationship with my wife, with my children, our grandchildren, it really became about deepening those relationships. And so I think that was another way that when we came away from it, it had built so much into our lives and into their lives that it was really refreshing and renewing on a level I didn't anticipate.
Today's episode of Church Chat is sponsored by our good friends at TEDS, Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. And you may have heard that TEDS is moving and becoming a part of Trinity Western University. And if you heard that, you heard right. Located in the beautiful British Columbia, but I have some good news for you. Though that is a phenomenal place to visit, you can still get all of the online educational resources anywhere in North America. That's you. No matter where you are, no matter who you are, Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, lovingly known as TEDS, is still accessible, still offering incredible content, and that content is still convenient and ready for you to get equipped for ministry, to work on your education. Check it out at www.teds.edu/churchchat. Exciting things coming from TEDS. Still available, still ready, still equipping you for ministry. So you're deep into the care world. You work with a ton of leaders. This podcast is largely probably being listened to by people who are involved in some sort of ministry, maybe not vocationally, but they're serving somewhere. What do you think the biggest need in the hearts of those who are involved in ministry is these days from a care perspective?
Well, yeah, like I said, I think care starts with belonging. And so I think we need to have a place where we belong. I think as leaders, as staff people, we need to have a place where we feel safe, and that we can come and just be ourselves and relax and talk to people. I mean, we have a small group that we're a part of that we feel very close to people. I have a counselor that I talk to at least once a month so that I have somebody that I can go to with things that I can't really tell to anybody else. I've got 100 stories in my head that I can't ever share with anybody. But I have a counselor that I can talk to about that, and it's safe for me to talk to them about that. My wife is somebody that I can go to and share anything with, and she will always speak truth in love into my life in a way that's super helpful. And so I think we have to have those places where we belong and we feel safe that will point us back to Jesus in those moments of despair, and they come.
Speaking of your wife, your lovely wife, Sue, you guys have been together a really long time.
Yep.
And I know Josh has been married also a really long time, but probably comparatively not as long as you. Are there any...
Thank you for that. And I love that I have been married for the amount of years that I have been married, but I don't feel like you need to define it as a really long time.
Well, I feel like I've been married a long time, but it's only been like 12 years. And you're older than I am, so...
Yeah.
Also throwing you under the bus.
Yeah.
I feel like, again, having a ministry marriage is difficult in some unique ways. What advice would you have for people in that same boat, how to remain healthy and set good boundaries and do ministry together well?
Yeah, Sue and I are in a really interesting season right now, because this thing about where I'm responsible for helping care for our staff, we're actually doing debrief sessions with each staff person, and we're doing those together. And so, yeah, that's been really fun for us to be back in ministry together, and we're doing some marriage mentoring with couples and doing that together. So that's been really fun. But I think if you're really going to work well together in ministry, sometimes you're going to work separately. And that was something I had a hard time learning. I really struggled with this when Sue and I when we were here before as volunteers, we were always in the youth ministry together. And then when I got on staff at another church, we were in youth ministry together. And then when we came here, we were in youth ministry together, and God started calling her into women and children's ministry. And man, I got kind of disgruntled about that. And I went through a real period of where I was really not happy that she wasn't in youth ministry with me anymore. And I went through a whole process of, before God, just going, I was just getting bitter about it, angry and bitter and resentful about it, and realized that when I was a kid growing up, my parents showed love to me by coming to my games. And I felt like Sue wasn't coming to my game. I had to let go of that expectation that she wasn't going to come to my game, and that she was doing what God called her to do. And if I could change that and let go of that expectation and repent of that expectation, then I was free now to encourage her to do what God called her to do. And man, that changed everything, because now these things were no longer something I was fighting against, but it was something I was propelling her into and praying for her and encouraging her to do. And she could do the same for me and propel me and encourage me into ministry. And so that heart expectation that I had, that almost heart demand that became an idol in my heart, I had to repent of, so that I could free her to go into ministry. And so I think that's something we just have to look out for in ministry. There may be times God calls us to do different things, and we really need to be okay with that and encourage each other in that.
Yeah, and I think increasingly, just with even the financial climate, I would say most partners are not both in ministry, right. They're doing their own things. I'm assuming that adds whole nother layer to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've had a lot of years of ministry together and a lot of years of ministry doing things in different directions. But we can look back on it now and just see how God had his hand in all of it. And it's sure, again, it's sure a whole lot easier to go along with God and what he's doing than it is to be fighting against him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you guys have weathered so many, like personal tragedy and just ups and downs. Vocationally, any other marriage advice for us comparative newbies?
Well, I mean, you talked about personal tragedy. I mean, literally 20 years ago this August, our daughter was killed in a car accident. And that was one of those moments where, you talk about, is your house, when the storm comes, is your house built on the rock or is it built on the sand? And I'm really grateful to say that Jesus was the rock that our house was built on. And so we survived that tragedy and we survived, but we saw him at work, but that was another situation where we grieved very differently. I'm an extrovert. And so I wanted to be with people and we would laugh and we would talk and we would cry and I would have this great day of grieving. And Sue's an introvert, so she wanted to be in the bedroom in the dark looking at pictures, laughing and crying all by herself. And then we'd come back together at the end of the day and go, we both had a really good day of grieving and we could process that together. But it was like, it'd be real easy to go, well, you're not doing it right. You're not doing it right. Right. But we had to let each other grieve in the way that made sense for each of us, and how long it took and all of that was very individual. And but it was, I think that's something that we've learned along the way, is that we've got to give each other space to grow the way God's working in each of our lives.
I like that, giving each other the space to grow. Yeah, because it's different. We're different people, and God grows us differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good, and so sorry about that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it was easily the darkest moments of our lives. I mean, but people would say, well, where was God when Laura died? And I said, man, he was right here in my face, right?
Yeah. It's tough to minister through that. I lost a brother in a car accident. He was 19, and I've lost both my parents while being in ministry. It's hard. It can be very hard to minister while you're grieving.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think in those moments we have to give ourselves grace because we just don't have the bandwidth that we normally have.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we just can't do the things we used to do. And I mean, I lost my cell phone when Laura died. The first 2 weeks she was gone. Couldn't find my cell phone anywhere. For 2 weeks I was looking for my cell phone. One day Sue called me and said, hey, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is I found your cell phone. The bad news is we need a new toilet. I'd flushed it down the toilet and it got stuck in there and the plumber couldn't get it out. They had to replace the toilet. But it's like, your brain, we said your brain's so full of grief, you put something in, something else is going to fall out. And so, it's just, you just don't have the bandwidth you normally would have.
So did you just lean on people around you during that time? Or?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, our small group came around us in a big way. Yeah. One of the people in our small group, a dear friend of ours, is a pediatrician. And so when we were at the accident happened down in Virginia. It was like 5 hours away. And he came down to be with us at the hospital because both my girls were in the car. So Laura had died, but Amy was banged up really bad and needed emergency surgery. And so he just stood there on the sidelines with us. And when the doctors were talking, all we could hear was like, wah, wah, wah.
Yeah.
But then we'd look at him and he'd nod his head and he'd say, yeah, that's the next thing to do. And we'd say, okay, do that. And so, there were people like that just came around us in a big way to help us. And my whole volunteer team that we had in youth ministry at that time, they literally took over youth ministry probably for 4 months. And that's when I transitioned out of youth ministry into the congregational life ministry too. So they actually ended up transitioning much longer than that. It was probably about a year and a half till the next person came in. So
you've talked a couple times about being involved in a small group, and my husband and I have awesome memories and still friendships from our small group at Faith Church. But I think sometimes that's hard as a ministry leader to plug into a small group and set up, I don't know if boundaries is the right word, but just sometimes it's difficult to connect to people who are also in your congregation while you're still being the leader. Do you feel like it's worth it? And what are some best practices on how to do that?
Yeah, you got to be really careful. Two of the people in our small group are elders. So I have to really be careful. I don't want to, right? I don't want to complain about anybody on staff or complain about, whatever happened this week, or I don't know. You do have to be a little careful. And anytime you're in ministry, I think you have to be careful that you're not just offhandedly saying things that are going to throw somebody under the bus or cast doubt on the church or leadership or anything like that. So I think we always have to be careful about that. But I think it is worth it. I mean, these are still people that, man, when I'm in crisis, if there's a major life crisis, they're there for us. Or if they're in a major life crisis, we're there for them. And it is that place where you belong and you fit, and for the most part, I mean, like 95% of the time, you can say whatever you want to say and whatever you need to say, and they're going to receive it well, and you're going to receive grace from them, and you're going to receive love and truth from them. So I think, yeah, it's definitely worth it.
So I also think your role is really difficult in the realm of just what people face these days, what the issues are, whether you're talking politically, economically, just all the things it feels like have just gotten more tense, worse, just awful. So has your approach to care changed at all in light of that? Or is it more difficult, more draining? How do you do that in today's climate?
I saw a study recently that said before COVID, 1 in 10 people said that anxiety was something that they struggled with on a daily basis. And post-COVID, it's 3 in 10 say that they struggle with anxiety on a daily basis. So just that single thing, just anxiety alone is up. And you just see people struggling with that anxiety on a daily basis. And some of that, I think, was precipitated by COVID and by being alone and by the fear of, man, am I going to die from COVID? So I think that was a stressful time that everybody went through, and there was no way to get away from it. There was nowhere to go where that wasn't happening. And so I think that was unusual for our climate in our world. In my experience, there's a world tragedy somewhere. There's always someplace you can go where that tragedy isn't happening. But COVID was a pandemic on a level that we've never had before. And so I think that's been really hard for people to cope with. Politically, things are very divisive in our country right now. And I think that's where we have to be careful. I think we're trying here just to really rise above all of that and go, it's about God's kingdom first. It's about following Jesus first. And all these other things have to come in line. And there's people on both sides of the political spectrum that are believers and that love Jesus. And we need to figure out a way to get along with each other and work together, not be divisive. And so, I think that's kind of the mantra that we're having with those kinds of things. But it is hard. It is hard because people are very divided over those things.
So has that changed how you care for people, or no?
I think I'm learning more and more to be curious and not judgmental.
Ooh, there you go.
And so I think
that'll preach.
Right. But I think that's really helpful. When somebody comes at you with something that's something I don't even agree with at all, it's much more effective for me to say, hey, tell me more about that. Or, what do you mean by that? Than to go, yeah, you're wrong, you're an idiot. Right? It's even though in my gut that may be what I want to say, right? But it's much more effective if I'm curious rather than judgmental.
Yeah, that is a good line. I like that one a lot. You've seen so many shifts just by being in ministry for so long, and also spending a decent amount of time in ministry at one church. How have you observed any changes in how people are engaging with the church in recent years? How have you adjusted to that?
Well, on a number of levels. I think there's a level of busyness amongst families that has reached a whole new level. I think, and so I feel like we're always competing. I think, and we've always to some degree been competing with sports and things like that, but it's on a whole nother level. I feel like now. I just feel like families are exhausted and they're just running all the time. So I think there's some of that people just don't have time to volunteer in the church. They don't have time to come to programs in the church. I think, and so I think we've tried to change things, like our care ministries, we have care groups that we have, like a divorce care group, a grief share group, celebrate recovery, celebration places for children, we have a health challenges together group for people dealing with health challenges. There's a fight for freedom group for guys that are struggling with pornography and sexual addiction, and there's a betrayal and beyond group for the wives of the husbands that are struggling. And so we've tried to target felt needs that people are really, crises that people are in. And I think that's probably something that when we've seen quite a few people come to our church through those avenues, because when they're in crisis, they're looking for answers. And I think, and so I think that's a time for us to really meet them where they're at, and they'll make time for that. If their life is crashing around them, they're going to make time for that. That becomes a priority at that point.
That's a great approach or adjustment. Because they'll make time for those things that are so desperate, almost feeling in their lives. We do. We all make time for those when push comes to shove.
Right.
Is there anything else you want to add before we ask our closing question?
One of the things too you were saying about in marriages and relationships, what do we need? And I think one of the things that I've really been seeing is that God wants me to be concerned about my character and my wife's needs. And when I get that backwards and I'm worried about my needs and her character, it goes bad really fast every time.
Wow.
Because if it's about my character, that's something I have control over. That's something I can go to God and ask him to change in me. And meeting her needs is something I have control over. But when I turn that around and I'm worried about her character, well, you just do this, or you never do that, or you're always like this. I'm not looking at my heart, the thing that I have control over and that I can change. If we can get that turned in the right direction, man, that'll revolutionize all of our marriages.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things that I think I've seen God use in my own heart, my own life, but I've also seen him use it in other people's as well.
Yeah, that's a banger to end on. I love it. Well, we end every episode by just sharing something that we're loving right now. It can be silly, serious, whatever you'd like.
Yeah. Sue and I are loving our camper. You have a camper? We have a camper that we leave down at a campsite near us about half an hour away all the time. It's just there all year round. We have 6 grandchildren now. They absolutely love coming to the camper. And, so we're down there, roasting hot dogs and making s'mores and kayaking and fishing and playing hide and seek in these big boulder fields. And they just love it. They're ages 14 to 3. There's girls on each end and then 4 little boys in the middle. And they just love it. The 3-year-old, she comes down there and she says, "Poppop, I must jump." And she just jumps off of things, jumping off of rocks, jumping off. You're just running behind her, grabbing her so she doesn't whack her head on anything. But she's just, I just saw them all in church on Sunday, and they're like, "When are we coming down to the camper?" So we're just loving that. That's the thing we're loving right now.
Yeah, that is amazing. Josh, do you have one?
Oh, you put me
I can
right
go.
here, huh?
I just
go ahead.
Okay. Mine's kind of dumb, but walks are kind of saving me right now. I used to consider myself a runner, but running just kind of, it like adds to my stress in a way that is dumb, in the realm of like, I need to beat my time. I need to like be fast, be good at this. So that's sometimes a detriment for me getting out there and moving my body. And in this season, I know I need to be outside getting the sunshine that is in New York right now. And I have let go of some dumb hangups about, needing to run instead of walk. And so I just go for walks, and I try to get out every day and walk a few miles and listen to my audiobook or just look at nature. So that's really been something really good lately.
You're loving it. Yeah,
I am loving it. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Yeah, so I think we don't have a lot of sunshine today. I'm in Pennsylvania, and I don't know when this is going to air. So this is a seasonal like thing, but it's just feeling like autumn a little bit today. You got a cool little breeze. It's a little overcast, and I love fall weather. I'm a sweatshirt guy. I love wearing sweatshirts and just being comfy, and so yeah, I'm just loving the change in the weather and the cool down, and I hope it lasts and lingers as long as possible.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to come out probably in the winter, and people are going to be so mad at you. They're like, "Oh, I miss pumpkins and
I'll tell you what,
crunchy leaves."
Spiced lattes, pumpkin
Yes.
spice lattes, and all that good. Well, tough, you know.
Yeah.
You can dream.
You can just
and hold
shiver in
on.
your snow
Yeah.
suit.
I
Dream
could
about
I could
fall.
just change it and be like, I love the first snow of the.
No, I just said it was sunny.
So anyway,
Well, I mean, I guess it can be sunny in the winter. But.
This has been an awesome conversation. Thanks so much for being on here, Greg. I took a lot of notes and stuff that I am like. These notes are easy for me to implement. Like, care starts with creating an environment where people belong. You can bet I'm going to audit like how we're doing with that. Like real soon. We have to hold on to everything loosely and just make it about Jesus. The be curious, not judgmental thing is something I need like on repeat. Like I need to like scribble that on my mirror in lipstick or something, you know, like some sort of like something crazy just to keep that on the front of my brain. And your advice too about marriages is so helpful. Like worry about my character and her needs, and it's just powerful stuff. So I'm just thankful that you gave us this hour, Greg, and were willing to share from your heart with us. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's been great.
We don't have a fancy way to say goodbye. Emily hasn't created one yet.
Okay.
So, hey, listeners, thanks so much for being on here. And until next time, we're just going to say, see you later.
Bye.
Bye.
The Church Head Podcast is for educational purposes only. We dive deep into important and sometimes sensitive conversations and topics about life in ministry. Please know that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely the views and the opinions of the guests and the hosts and do not necessarily represent the organizations that we work for. Nor should our views or opinions be considered a full perspective of circumstances that may be mentioned in this podcast. Our perspectives are limited, and so will be this podcast. What we hope to do is have conversations and spark greater conversations that will lead leaders and their organizations towards greater health. The Church Chat Podcast is edited by Emily Gardner and produced by Emily Gardner and Josh Ott. The Church Chat Podcast is supported by EFCA East, an Eastern District of the Evangelical Free Church of America covering 6 states. EFCA East helps leaders live well, lead well, and multiply, helping churches find new vitality and multiply transformational churches on the East Coast. The EFCA is multiplying transformational churches among all people. For more information, visit efcaeast.com. We hope you enjoyed this podcast and can't wait to see you on the next Church Chat episode.